Tonight's shir is sponsored Leilui Nishmas Yisrael ben Avraham, whose yahrzeit was on Yud Tammuz. His neshama should have an aliyah. We'll start off with saying Good Yom Tov. In Lubavitch we say Good Yom Tov today on Yud Beis Tammuz. Yud Beis Tammuz, just very quickly. We'll talk about it maybe a little more later on in the shir. Is the birthday of the Previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, Rabbi Yitzchak. He was born on Yud Beis Tammuz in the year Tafresh Mem in 1880. And then, when the Rebbe was 46 years old, he was arrested in 1927. So he was arrested on Teshuvah Sivan, on the 15th day of Sivan, for leading all the activities throughout the USSR in resisting the Soviets' attempt to quell Yiddishkeit, and he had underground chadarim and yeshivas and mikvahs and sheikhtim. So he was arrested, and originally he was actually sentenced to death, the Previous Rebbe, and that death sentence was commuted to 10 years of hard labor, and then it was further commuted to 3 years of gadlus, 3 years of exile in some far-off city. And the city's name is Kostroma. No idea where it is, but very far from any from any Jewish community.
Siberia or something?
I don't think it's in Siberia. No. And the Rebbe was released from prison on Gimel Tammuz, on the third day of Tammuz, so that's around 3 weeks after he was imprisoned. And he was immediately sent off to Kostroma, where he was for 9 days. On the 12th day of Tammuz, on his birthday, that's when he received notification that he was freed. And he wasn't actually able to leave until the next day, on the 13th of Tammuz, because the 12th of Tammuz was a Yom Tov, a holiday, some sort of national holiday. So the offices were closed and he couldn't get his papers. So he actually left on the 13th of Tammuz. But on the 12th of Tammuz, that's when he was notified that he was free. And this is the Chag HaGeula, the festival of liberation of the Previous Rebbe, which is celebrated. Actually, today is 90 years since he was liberated. And again, we'll talk about it. On the Lubavitch, it's celebrated as a Yom Tov. In fact, when on the following year, the Previous Rebbe he had left Russia. He was expelled from Russia. So on Simchas Torah, the day after Simchas Torah, the following year, he left and he was in Riga for a little while. So he sent a letter to all the Chassidim who are celebrating the year anniversary of the liberation, and he said that it wasn't only me, who had this geula, who had this liberation, but all the people who are Shemrei Torah mitzvahs, and even anyone who b'shem Yisrael yichuna, anyone who's just called a Jew, was also freed. It was a Yom Tov for Klal Yisrael. And the Ness in it was amazing. I mean, some of you over here, or maybe all of you over here, are old enough to remember what the Soviet Union was like. And that was so you remember what the Soviet Union of the 80s or the 70s. Maybe someone here remembers the Soviet Union of the 60s, but we're talking about the Soviet Union of the 20s, which was much, much worse. And there was a lot of international pressure that was put on the Soviet government to allow the Rebbe to go free. But the fact that that pressure worked is in itself an incredible miracle, because that's like trying to pressure today North Korea into doing something, and they just don't care. And the Soviet Union then also was in that situation. It was shortly after the Russian Revolution, and they were very tyrannical, and it was a very, very big miracle. And because of that, the Previous Rebbe left Russia and he went to Latvia, ended up eventually in Poland, and then he escaped in 1940 from Nazi-occupied Warsaw, also miraculously, in 1940 to get out of Warsaw. And he arrived in America, in New York, and in March of 1940. He arrived in New York, where he lived for the last 10 years of his life until he passed away in 1950. And when the Previous Rebbe arrived in America, So he was physically a broken person. I think maybe we spoke about this recently.
Was he beaten in prison?
He was definitely beaten in prison, but that wasn't the main contributor. He suffered a stroke, or maybe even a series of strokes in the 1930s.
I saw it was a wheelchair.
And he suffered from multiple sclerosis, most importantly.
Oh,
Yeah. So he was in a wheelchair. He wasn't even able to speak clearly. Only the people who were very close to him were able to understand his speech because it was slurred. So people who went into Yechidus, the private audiences with him, they had to have like one of the Rebbe secretaries to come in to just explain to them what the Rebbe was saying.
Have any recordings of that? I never heard a recording.
There definitely is a recording of the Friedrich Rebbe, but it's not available for the.
For money on?
What?
For the public.
But I think they went around on WhatsApp a little while ago. But you can't understand what the But we have the sichos. He did speak, and people did transcribe his talks, and he was also writing. The Friedrich Rebbe was a prolific writer. Just besides for his memoirs and besides for the Mamarim, the Chassidic discourses that he wrote around 100,000 letters in his lifetime. And we know that because he numbered his letters. He wrote them in his notebooks and he numbered them. So we don't have all of them because some of them got lost over the years, but by the numberings we're able to estimate. We're talking 100,000 letters, and each one, we're not talking about dictated, we're talking about, he wrote every single one of his letters. By hand. What? Yeah. He wrote them in notebooks, and then his secretary would take them and type them up. But originally they were notebooks. And some of the letters, by the way, so he wrote one letter to his daughter, the Rebbetzin, the wife of the current Rebbe, and in printed form, we don't have the entire letter. It's cut off in the middle. So we only have the first 300 pages of the letter.
What did he write? 300 pages.
I mean, it's here. I could show it to you. In case you think I'm exaggerating, there is right over there, that set behind me, 17-volume set is the letters of the Friedrich Rebbe. And obviously they didn't publish everything. We don't have everything, but also something which was private they didn't publish, or something which was, some standard letters. But that's so in volume 3, you can look in there. It's a lengthy story about the students of the Baal Shem Tov. But again, we only have the first part of the letter, and it's actually translated into English. That letter, probably maybe downstairs. They translated the letter to English. It's a fascinating story. It's very disappointing when it ends. I mean, because it ends in the middle. We don't have the end. So he was a prolific writer. But when he came to New York, again, he was physically a broken person, and he was greeted by the docks, by some Lubavitch Chassidim who were here. But we're talking about the Lubavitch Chassidim who were here for the most part. They weren't, they were without beards, and they were with. The people had come to America, had become Americanized, so to say. And there were a few Chassidim here who were, still kept the spirit of the old country and of Lubavitch. But he had a lot of admirers here. He had already visited here in 1929. He visited here for a few months in America and went around. There were a lot of Chabad admirers over here, and he was greeted by the doc, and he said that people told him, "We're so glad that you came here. So if you escaped Russia, you escaped the Nazis, and now finally you can rest and you can relax." And that's when the Friedrich Rebbe said his famous words. He said, "I didn't come here to relax. I didn't come here to rest. America is nicht anders. America is not different. We have to replace Europe over here." And he said that he's not going to sleep that night until there's Lubavitch Yeshiva opened up in New York City. So on the very first day, they opened up a Lubavitch Yeshiva in Brooklyn. They opened it up. No, the Rebbe hadn't moved to Crown Heights yet. The Rebbe only moved to Crown Heights in Elul later on that year. But it was opened up in East Flatbush, actually. That was they had 10 Bachram on the first day. I believe that my wife's grandfather was one of those 10 boys who, when he was already studying Chassidus beforehand, and his name was Beryl Baumgarten. And he left Harivadas and he came to Lubavitch Yeshiva. And immediately the Friedrich Rebbe embarked upon sending out people all over the country, Bachram, to start yeshivas and day schools. And in Buffalo and in Worcester and in Chicago and really sowed the seeds for what later would become the work of the Rebbe in terms of spreading Yiddishkeit in America. So even in a very practical sense, a very large part of the revival of Yiddishkeit, post-Holocaust, is due to the work of the previous Rebbe, of the Friedrich Rebbe, which again was multiplied and magnified by the Rebbe. And it's not only him, but I think, as we spoke on different occasions, all the other different Kiruv organizations, which maybe be, which today there's so many of them, Baruch Hashem, Kenai Nahara, but they're really all, they're all there from the original vision of the previous Rebbe. We're not coming here to build up walls and create our own little insular communities only, but we're here. We're not on the defensive. We're on the offensive. Because most of the from Yidden that came from Europe to America, they were on the defensive. They were like, "This is a terrible place, America," and a lot of terrible influences over here. So we have to really hunker down and just to protect our own communities. That's definitely a valid way of looking at things, and there are a lot of beautiful communities created that way, whether it's Borough Park and Williamsburg and Lakewood. But the Rebbe, taking the cue from his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, had a totally different tactic, which is we're not here on a defensive mission, we're here on an offensive mission. We're here to reverse and stem the tide of assimilation. And therefore, when the Friedrich Rebbe said that it wasn't only me who was redeemed, but in essence it was Klal Yisrael, it was a Yom Tov for Klal Yisrael, I think that history bears that out, that it was, and we could definitely say in hindsight, that the release of the Friedrich Rebbe had a very, very strong impact on Yiddishkeit everywhere in the world. So that's Yom Tov that's celebrated today. Yeah.
When he said that Americans need answers, was that in response to somebody trying to tell him that here as Americans it's going to be very difficult for you to do anything?
They were trying to explain to him that in America you can't do things the way they were in Europe, and and it's different. And he says, that's when his famous response came, America is nicht anders. And that was something that became like a motto. America is nicht anders. Torah can flourish here. Yiddishkeit can flourish over here. And I think everyone sitting over here in this room is a living testament to that vision of that America is nicht anders.
This library is a testament to it.
Yeah. But in general, of the people who came to America beforehand, it was terrible. It was terrible. The Frum people came to America. Even those who managed to remain from the children from the Einaklach, I mean, you have...
It became fried,
yeah, but they're
East side is the Long Island, became lawyers and doctors.
You have, as they say, Echad Be'ir, Shtayim, Echad B'Shtayim Be'ir, Echad B'Mishpacha, two people from a city, one person from a family, maybe remained from, but there was the genuine fear of America. And it's not for nothing that when people came to America from people, they were like, okay, let's, but the Friedrich Rebbe had a larger vision than that. He was like, we're not settling for just that. And really, you think about it, Chassidic Rebbe, an elderly person, comes from Europe with these incredible ambitions. Most people wanted to come. Most Rebbes that came to America. Okay, let me reestablish my community. Let me establish my Chassidus. Let me find a few Chassidim, to have a tish and say Chassidus. I mean, most of his Chassidim were killed either in Russia or in Poland, and that's again what most of the Rebbes did when they came here. But the Friedrich Rebbe was just on a different wavelength in terms of what his ambition was. He was like, it's not about rebuilding Lubavitch. I didn't come here to rebuild Lubavitch. This is much larger than that. And he really started that offensive, which continues till this very day.
What was it about America that swallowed everything up? Why was it so? What was it about America that was like that compared to Europe, which was, I guess, not like that?
The materialism, the capitalism, and the allure, the allure. I mean, first of all, to a smaller extent, it was true in also in different places in Western Europe where there was more liberty and more opportunities. Whether that was in Germany, where Austria, and places in Western Europe, and even in Eastern Europe. Obviously, it's not like Yiddishkeit was so stable in the beginning of the 20th century. My grandfather was from Krakow, Poland. That's Eastern Europe. And he came from a family of he had 11 brothers and sisters. He was one of 11, and with totally frum Hasidic parents. And he was the only one who remained frum before the war. Before the war, I'm talking. And but you have to compound that. There were so many different.
Couldn't keep Shabbos over here. They just fine you.
There was.
If you don't come to work on Shabbos, don't come Monday.
There's the issue of keeping Shabbos, but I think that around the 20s and the 30s that got a little easier when a lot of America shifted to already to a 5-day work week. But in the beginning of the 20th century, like today, people, a teenager goes off the derech. What are they into? Music, movies, right? What other? Then, what was the? If you wanted to be cool, what did you do?
College.
You read Marx, you read Trotsky, you read Herzl. It was the most. That was what everyone was into. Was all the isms, all the different intellectual movements that were out there, and a lot of Yidden, again, a lot of from Yidden became very. So that was true in Eastern Europe, but especially when you come to a country like America, where again, yes, where definitely Shmira Shabbos wasn't easy, and where there was this very strong mentality of not looking or being different than everyone else, and there were opportunities out there, financial opportunities. There was no discrimination, and the from infrastructure here was very weak. Yeah, what did you have? 1 yeshiva, 2 yeshiva. So you had the Chves, you had RJJ, and you had Tervadas, Chaim Berlin, but in most communities where people went, there was nothing going on. There was nothing really to keep the children. The children.
Maybe the biggest thing is there's no infrastructure. Just go to the wild, wild west.
And girls' schools forget about it. Even if there were some yeshivas for the Bachram, and the girl, and that was a big deal also in Europe. That's why a lot of the girls, I think I mentioned this in the past. In Russia, in the early 20th century, there was a shidduch crisis. From a Bachram couldn't find from a girls. It was the reverse. Yeah, it was in the reverse. It was because since there were no yeshivas for the girls, and we're talking about in communist Russia, where the girls, most of them, they went to shkola, they went to the Goyish schools, and they were like flies. They were becoming frei, and to find a girl that was a Yirah Shamayim was much more difficult than to find a boy that was a Yirah Shamayim. It's a big issue back then. Anyways, we're going off on tangents over here and over there. The bottom line is that today is a big Yom Tov. It's a big Yom Tov. It's a day when a person who was an incredible Baal Mesiras Nefesh, and that's really what was. He wasn't looking for rest because that wasn't in his bones. We're talking about a person wherever he went. Because you think about it, his first decade of leadership was in Russia, fighting the communists and standing up to the communists, and with literally with chutzpah, an incredible amount of chutzpah. There's a famous story that this is in the early 20s. He was arrested several times. He wasn't the last time was 1927, but the famous story how in the early 20s he was once called in for interrogation. This was 1921, and a bunch of people sitting around the table, a big table, and every single one of them had a gun, a revolver. Look at the table in front of them, and he's in the head of the table, and they're asking him different questions, and he wasn't being very. The Rebbe wasn't being very cooperative. So one of them picks up his gun, and he very, very calmly says, "This little toy that I have over here has made many people speak. It makes even people who are mute, it makes them speak too." And the Rebbe very calmly responded and said, "That toy that you have in your hand, it makes speak people who have one world and two gods. I have two worlds and one God, so that toy doesn't impress me." That was with a complete calmness and Yishuv Hadas, collectedness, to be able to respond to that. And in prison also, he was incredible Mesiras Nefesh. He didn't. Originally, he was supposed to be released not on Gimel Tammuz, but on Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, which was a Thursday. It was a 3-day journey to this place of exile. So when he asked them when he's going to arrive, they said on Shabbos. He says, "I'm not going." So I'll stay in jail. He says, they told him, if you stay in jail, you might not get out. He says, okay. I'm not traveling on Shabbos. And obviously, halachically, he had every right in the world to go on that train and to get out of jail. And others, there are different stories about him in prison where he showed incredible Mesiras Nefesh, but it's really one type of Mesiras Nefesh. And then to come to America, which is the opposite spectrum, a totally different challenge, completely different challenge, and there to just start all again, all from new, but in a totally different way. It shows on a person it was just a complete Baal Mesiras Nefesh, and again, the fact that we're sitting here today is probably all a credit to him. I guess just one last thing. On Gimel Tammuz, so he was released from prison. He had like a few hours to go home and get his stuff, and then he had to go to the train station. That was a Sunday, and so a crowd of Chassidim gathered at the train station to see him off. Which, okay, that's normal, right? No, but that's actually every Chassid who came. That was an incredible Mesiras Nefesh, because to be seen with the Previous Rebbe was a great danger. For many, many years after the Previous Rebbe already left Russia, one of the biggest crimes to be accused of in Russia was to be a Schneersohnsky. They'd arrest someone because you're a Schneerson person. I mean, the Previous Rebbe was considered to be the worst of the counter-revolutionaries. That's what they were called. You're not a revolutionary because they're communists are the revolutionaries. So if you go against them, you're a counter-revolutionary. In other words, you're making trouble against the troublemakers. That's so the Previous Rebbe was considered the ultimate counter-revolutionary, and he was seen off by crowds of Chassidim, and he was standing on the platform by the train, and he addressed his Chassidim, and he told them like this, what became very famous words. He said that let all the nations of the world know that our Father in heaven, He sent us into Galus, into exile, and He will take us out of exile. We're not going to get ourselves out. He'll take us out. But let all the nations of the world know that only our bodies are in exile, and not our souls. And anything that's connected to Torah and mitzvahs, there's no one in the world who has any power over us whatsoever. And he said this in public. He right now was released from prison and being sent to exile for 3 years, and to openly defy the authorities and to give a speech like that. But that way he was a person who had no fear, and it was all about spreading Torah and Yiddishkeit. Yeah.
One last question. What prompted him to decide to leave Europe and go to America?
In 1940?
Was the war still
And why,
dead?
did he try to go to Palestine or only America?
There was a ton of work in America with the State Department and with different channels to get the Rebbe out. I don't think there was
Gotta get a visa.
infrastructure in Israel.
He didn't try the alternative of
Whatever was available. This is 1940 in Warsaw. You don't, maybe I'll go to Aruba instead. Wherever you go, you go. But ultimately, the Kavanah Olyena, the divine plan was for him to obviously was to go to America, and there's no question that being in America, he had in New York, there is no more international city than that, and a person's ability to influence is greatest over there. And the Rebbe was asked on several occasions why he didn't go to Israel. And there are different answers, but one of the answers the Rebbe would give, the Rebbe would say, first of all, if I go there, I can't come back. That's number one. Halachically, there are issues. Says once I go there, says the word Rebbe says, I know the way there, but I don't know the way back. And I have to be here because this is the place from where I can best lead. You have to remember, the Rebbe had shluchim in Morocco, he had shluchim in Tunisia, he had shluchim in Russia, and from Israel you'd be limited in your contacts with all these people. America strategically was the best place where to be. So Hashgacha Olyena put over here where you can have the largest influence all over the world.
Did you try to leave before 1940?
No. He was in Poland, in Warsaw, he had a yeshiva there. And then when the Nazis arrived, I mean, the fact that he was able to get out was miraculous. There's a whole story about it. Maybe you have the book here also downstairs. The whole, I forget the name of the book. It's in English, documenting the Friedrich Rebbe's escape. It was incredible miracles. He was taken out of Russia by the Gestapo, out of Warsaw by the Gestapo through Berlin, okay, to Riga, from where he went to America. It was an incredibly miraculous story how they were able to arrange that.
And they didn't put him in. A person can easily be put in a concentration camp.
Right.
During the war to stop him.
America wasn't even the reason why America was not yet officially at war with Germany at that time. It was before 1941. Right. So there was some sort of a little diplomatic connections that they had. And what's interesting is that they had a hard time locating the Friedrich Rebbe, because the Gestapo was going all over looking for the Friedrich Rebbe. They were looking for him to get him out. But obviously, the Rebbe and the Chassidim aren't exactly, so it took a while for them to find in Warsaw the Friedrich Rebbe so they can get him out. It was an interesting story all on its own. Okay. We have some Tanya to study. So last week, we talked about how, although that a person who takes time to deeply contemplate his own spiritual sorry state, as described at length in the last two chapters, in chapters 29 and 30, that could lead the person to atzvus gedola, a great sadness. The Alter Rebbe says, don't worry, because this is just part of the path. You're in a bad place right now. You're a person, we're talking about a person who is suffering timtum halev hamayach. We're talking about a person whose mind and heart aren't receptive to the fire of the neshama. And the reason why the mind and the heart aren't receptive is because the ego is too strong. So you have to break your ego. You have to break your ego through ego. And how do you do that? In other words, by thinking about how lowly you are and breaking your ego. That will free you of the grips of your ego. You're breaking your ego, and that allows you then to be able to move on to the next steps. And the next step is, as we said, is merirus, which is bitterness. Bitterness is not about it's not depression, it's not lethargy. That's actually, there's great energy in bitterness, and there's motivation to, and they have their motivation to move on and to move forward, and ultimately that will lead you to simcha, as we will talk about probably later on today, how that leads to simcha. But first, Alter Rebbe says, 3 lines from the bottom of page 78. Actually, let's start 4 lines from the bottom, even though we're repeating our drop from what we said last week. And therefore our sages tell us, a person should always get his Yetzer Tov angry at his Yetzer Hara. What does that mean? When it says lo olam, it doesn't mean always. That's not a constant avodah. That's not the way we should be behaving in a constant way. But whenever you see that it's necessary, in other words, whenever you see that you're feeling dull and you're feeling unexcited, that's a time when to think about your lowly spiritual state, and thereby to transfer your feelings from material ones to spiritual ones and move up on the ladder. However, Shas HaKosher, when is the best time, the most auspicious time for this? Shisha HaMyuchedes, a time which is unique, V'ru'ya Lakach, and worthy of this, L'Reiv B'nei Adam, for most people, He b'shah shu atzev belav hachim mili da almas, in a time when you're anyways upset about some sort of material matter. Ekach b'lishum siba, or if you're sad and you're not even sure why you're sad. Azai then he shas hakosher. That is the proper time, the auspicious time. Lahapech ha'etzav, to transform the sadness. Lios memari the chushbana hanal, and to be a master of reckoning, is mentioned in chapter 29. That was to make a reckoning of your spiritual state. And thereby to fulfill that which our sages say, la'ilam yagis v'chulu, to get your yetzer tov angry at the yetzer hara, k'niskar li'il, as mentioned earlier. This way you'll get rid of your sadness from material matters, this is a fascinating thing. For those of you who recall, earlier on in chapter 26, the Alter Rebbe devoted a whole idea, almost a full side of a page. What do we do if a person is upset about material matters? Bani, chayim, mezayna, children, health, livelihood. And the Alter Rebbe over there talks about how this idea of contemplating of gamzula toiva, and how everything that comes from Hashem is good, and there's only two different types of good. There's alma diskasya and alma disgalia. There's good that comes from the revealed world, and that's good that we perceive to be good. And then there's alma diskasya, the good that comes from the hidden world, and that's good that we don't perceive as good. We're not going to rehash everything that we spoke about over there. But here, the Alter Rebbe seemingly is giving us a different path. He's saying, if a person finds themselves upset and distressed and sad about material matters, Alter Rebbe says, you know what, that's a wonderful opportunity. You're already in a negative place. You're already in a sad place. Right? Take a few moments now. Take a few moments, take a half an hour, take an hour, to start contemplating your spiritual state. By the time you finish with that, you're not going to be worried anymore about your material matters, because you'll realize that your spiritual woes are much worse and much more consequential than anything material that's going on. Once you've switched, made that transfer, that you're not worried anymore about the material, and now you're focused on the spiritual, now you can continue on moving. Move it to merirus, move it to bitterness, and from there, you'll be able to move it to happiness. So this is a fascinating way of dealing with material issues, is that say, oh, you think that's a problem? I'll tell you it's really a problem. My spirit, I'm upset now about my material state. That's nothing. Sit down and take a few moments. Well,
You can't ignore the material problems.
you can't ignore it, but you're as mentioned last week, you're much more receptive to thinking and contemplating your spiritual woes when you're anyways in a sad state. When you're having a great day at work and everything's good and you sit down, but spiritually, okay, I'm not in the mood of that right now. But when you're anyways down, when you're anyways in a bad mood, that is the perfect time, because the atmosphere is already set. Atmosphere, we're big believers in this idea of fostering environments that are conducive. The environment has already been created, and now all you have to do is fill it in. Shabbos and Yom Tov, right? Well, we were eating, fish and meat and all these things. Why are we doing all these things? Shabbos really, v'yismuchu b'cha, right? V'yanuchu boi. It's about Hashem. It's a spiritual day. Shabbos l'Hashem. But if your body is in a bad place, it's hard for your neshama to be happy. So we want to get also your body in a good place, because there's this transference. If you're already in a down state, it's easy now to transfer that to a different place. And once your concerns are spiritual and not material, that already is easier to turn into happiness, for reasons that we'll discuss as we go on in this chapter. From selfish material depression, you can't become happy. But if you manage to move it over, massage it over, and make it into a spiritual issue, from there already you can transition to happiness. Yes?
Did Rebbe talk about what specific contemplations that you think about regarding your low spiritual state?
Yes, that was chapters 29 and chapters 30. So how do we move from a place of sadness to a place of happiness? I'm all distraught about my spiritual state. How do I move from there to happiness? The key is as follows. As we know, as discussed on many occasions, every one of us has not one, but two identities. Nefesh HaBahamis, self-centered, egotistical, seeks gratification. And there's the Nefesh HaLikis, the godly soul, seeks connection to Hashem, is batal. And as mentioned earlier also, simcha, real simcha is associated with the Nefesh HaLikis, with the neshama. Any joy that is experienced by the animal soul is fleeting. And the animal soul doesn't really know what happiness is, what real happiness is. Think about it. Think about one of the greatest joys that your animal soul got. You wanted something for a long time and you finally got it. I don't know. A car, a house, a smartphone, right? Whatever. Think of a time when your animal soul finally, and then how long did that happiness last?
Very finite.
How long did it last? That excitement last? That thrill last? What? A few minutes?
A day, two, a few minutes, an hour. Depends on what.
They took lottery winners, and somehow or other, I don't know how they did this, but they scientifically, they tracked them and their happiness levels, and they found out that someone who wins a lottery, we talk about millions of dollars, they get a happiness bump for around 6 months. 6 months later, they're back to exactly where they were. Not financially; they still have millions in the bank, but in terms of happiness, they're exactly where they were. And that's because the nature of the animal soul is it can never really be satisfied. It can never be really happy. It gets little thrills and it gets excited, but it always wants, and whatever it has, it wants more. That's human nature. When we say human nature, we mean the nature of the Nefesh HaBahamis. It never can have complete joy. So right now, when you have the $1 million, so you're right now not fully focused in it, but there are how many other things in your life that you still don't have and that you still want? The Nefesh HaLikis can take joy in doing a mitzvah. We spoke about this, I think, last week. Complete, 100%, unadulterated joy in doing a mitzvah. It has no agendas. This is its agenda. All it wants to do is to do the mitzvah. And when it does it, it experiences incredible joy. So, how do I experience joy? I have to start identifying with my Nefesh HaLikis. I have to start viewing myself as a Nefesh HaLikis and identifying with the agenda of the Nefesh HaLikis. How does that sound to everyone?
It sounds like you're asking your Nefesh HaBahamis to identify with the Nefesh HaLikis. When you say I, what?
You're saying the I is the Nefesh HaBahamis, right?
There's only two souls.
It's antagonistic with one another.
The problem is that we're so Nefesh HaBahamistic. We're so into our self-centered, that side of us, that we have a very difficult time identifying with the neshama. What that means is that the weaker the Nefesh HaBahamis becomes, the more I have the ability to identify with the Nefesh HaLikis, and the more I have the ability to be happy.
How you weaken it?
We just spent 2 chapters talking about that.
You said breaking it down. In Absolute.
What is the Nefesh HaBahamis? It's ego. We spent 2 chapters breaking ego.
Break it together.
So breaking ego, most people say, oh, so that's going to make you depressed. No, that's going to make you happy. Because what you do when you're breaking the ego is you're allowing the real and the truest you to come to the fore. Your Nefesh HaLikis, your neshama. And you can experience the truest neshama, the simcha of the neshama. Remember, we spoke about b'chol etza v'yeh moiser, that from every etza, from every sadness, there comes a happiness. This is what we're talking about over here. When you spend time being sad, meaning thinking about how lowly you are, what you're really doing is you're producing the advantage, which is the simcha that's going to follow. You're allowing yourself to connect to your neshama. Because when we're so self-engrossed and self-absorbed, We can't feel our neshama. We can't identify with it. It's two opposites over here. So therefore, not only, this is the main point, it's not only that the sadness doesn't contradict happiness. You can't have the happiness without the sadness beforehand. It's not that out there saying you can be happy despite the sadness. No. You're happy because of the sadness. Because we spent 2 chapters breaking our egos and realizing that this facade, this whole me that I'm building up is so woefully inadequate, so stop focusing on that. Stop focusing on the me. Why should I invest so much time and effort and energy and thought into me when I'm woefully nothing? But that's only one part of me that's woefully nothing. That's the nefesh habahamis. There's another side to me. But only after I totally, in the words of Tanya, I'm mimayis the nefesh habahamis. I'm repulsed by the other side, by the egocentric and the gratification desiring part of me. Only then am I free to really identify with and feel the joy of my neshama. Let's do this inside. 3 lines on the top of Perek Mem, and we now officially at this moment are transitioning into a few chapters of joy, just in time for the 3 weeks. There's a vart, a Chassidish vart, not a Chabad vart, a Chassidish vart, but the Rebbe, I quoted it on several occasions, that Mishenichnas Av Memayitin B'Simcha, that when Av comes Memayitin, we diminish the Avelus B'Simcha through being happy. How do we lessen the spirit of besimcha through happiness? But obviously that doesn't mean to contravene halacha, and halacha remains. But there is simcha that is allowed, and that is, what is the simcha that is allowed? Is the simcha shel mitzvah, and through simcha shel mitzvah we diminish all the bad things of av. So we diminish the bad things and the avelus of av through simcha shel mitzvah. So it really is just in time, learning what it means to have simcha on Hashem and have simcha on a mitzvah. In fact, the Rebbe was very into this, and the Rebbe encouraged the Chassidim, and it's done till today, that every single day of the 9 days, including Teshuvah, to make a siyum mesechta, and not to eat meat. In other words, many Lubavitchers don't eat meat because the Rebbe Rasham, even though he would make a siyum, but he wouldn't eat meat. So many Lubavitchers won't eat meat even after a siyum. But regardless, a siyum is every day. In Lubavitch Shuls, every day there's a siyum. Most about what?
Not for the purpose of eating meat.
It's not about eating meat. Like in other circles, you need the siyum for the meat. It's not about that, because I already said in the 9 days we need to add in simcha, and therefore we need to have a legitimate simcha shel mitzvah. So and then on the day before Teshuvah and on Teshuvah, when you're not allowed to learn, so what you are allowed to learn is mesechtas Moed Katan. So you can make a siyum on Moed Katan. So even on Tisha B'Av there's a siyum mesechta in Lubavitch Shuls on Moed Katan. And then later years the Rebbe asked to extend it till Tu B'Av, that every day till Tu B'Av to have a siyum. So it's a scramble this time. Can you finish a mesechta? Can you finish a mesechta? But so we are actually in time over here to experience some simcha, which will dispel some of the avelus, but in a legitimate way, dispel some of the avelus of the 3 weeks. Mitzvah Hashem, we shouldn't have the 3 weeks. So you take a complete lesson of simcha this year.
Right.
So we're making a transition. And afterwards, you'll be able to come to true joy. How do you arrive at true joy? This is what you should take to heart, to doubly console yourself. After you've digested all the things and all the truths we mentioned earlier about exactly how despicable and how lowly you are, and they're all true. Tell to yourself, it is true without a doubt. I'm very distant from Hashem. Betachlis, ultimately distant from Hashem. And disgusting and masuv and repulsive, chulu, etc. However, here's the but. Calls ani levadi. All this is me alone who aguf. That all describes the lowliness and the repulsiveness, describes my body and the animal soul. However, despite that, I have within me a piece of Hashem, literally, something which exists even within the lowest of the low. This is the godly soul, mamish, with a spark of godliness, literally, which is within it, to give it life. So there are two sides to the coin. Everything we said before is true, but that's only half the story. It's all true about how low I am, but it's only half the story. The other half is I have a nefesh alikis. The only thing is that my nefesh alikis is in galus, is in exile. And if so, to the contrary, the further I am from Hashem, v'hatiyuv v'shikutz, and the more disgusting and repulsive I am, ha'inefesh or likis shabi, then my neshama which is within me is begolus gadol yeser, is an even greater golus. V'rachmanus Allah gedolah moed. What? It's such a pity, such a rachmanus on my neshama, that it's stuck in this despicable, materialistic, gratification-seeking vessel. And therefore, what am I going to do about this? I'm going to make it my entire wish, my entire aspiration, lohitzia, to take my neshama out, and to elevate it megalus from this galus that it's in, Shiva al beis avia kinureha, to return it to its father's house as it was in its youth. In other words, as it was before it came down with my body. Before the neshama came down with my body, which at that time it was completely subsumed in Hashem's light, and united with him betachlis. I wanted that the same thing should be right now. I can cause that my neshama should be subsumed and united with Hashem. When I put my entire energy into studying Torah and doing mitzvahs, and to make that all the 10 aspects, faculties of my neshama should be completely preoccupied in Torah and mitzvahs. And especially b'mitzvahs tefillah, when it comes to davening litzeik al Hashem, that allow the neshama to scream out to Hashem, but sarla megalusa, in its straits, in its desperate place, in its galus, begufi amashukats, in its galus, in my repulsive body, lohitzia memasker, to take it out of its jail, l'davka b'yisbarach, and to connect to Hashem. So my body, I give up on it. My body, minafshe bahamis, it's disgusting, terrible, horrible, materialistic, flawed. But that's you know what? That's not my goal in my life. I'm focusing on my neshama. I'm focusing right now. I'm returning my neshama right now to Hashem through Torah mitzvahs, and the incredible joy that my neshama has every single time I study Torah and I do a mitzvah. Because every time I do that, I'm releasing my neshama from its bondage and allowing it to reunite with Hashem. Can I allow myself to feel the joy of my neshama? But I can only feel the joy of my neshama if my body isn't powerful. My nefesh hamis isn't powerful. So that's what we were engaging in the last 2 weeks. Not 2 weeks, I don't know, 2 months. In weakening the body, and weakening our ego, weakening our arrogance, so that finally we could say, genug midem, enough with that. Let me focus on my neshama. That's the only thing worth in life focusing on, is the neshama and the aspirations and the joy of the neshama. What's interesting is, Bashkacha Pratis, he talks over here, he says how the neshama is released from its prison every time a yid learns Torah. You don't realize this, but when we're studying Torah, for the neshama, this is like This is like someone who's been underwater for 2 minutes and comes up for air. That's what it's like when we're studying Torah for the neshama. It's stuck a whole day in its materialistic body and nefesh habahamis. And when it studies Torah, when you do a mitzvah, it's the biggest joy possible. And we have to try to connect to that joy. And then the Alter Rebbe says, and especially, ubefrat the mitzvah tefillah, especially, where does the neshama feel the most that it, that it's being released is when it davens. Davening is where the neshama gets to express itself. A whole day, it's. I heard a word from a chassid. He said he saw it somewhere in Chassidus. We say in davening, "Va'ata Hashem Elokeinu, moedim anachnu lach." Say it in Vayvarach David. What's the context over there? We tell Hashem that you have strength. You have the strength to make everything great or to make everything strong. What does moedim mean?
Give thanks.
Moedim means to give thanks, right? But there's another meaning to the word moedim. What's the other meaning to the word moedim? Moedim can mean to submit, or something similar also to admit. Right? Like right? That they admit, I made a mistake before and I'm moida. So when you turn to Hashem during davening, you say, Va'ata Hashem Elokeinu, now we admit that a whole day we're lying, and a whole day but now we're admitting the truth. The whole day we walk around thinking that our fate is in our own hands and we can make another few dollars by working for another few hours and doing this and doing that. And if we do this and we do that, and now when we come to davening, we call the bluff of the guf and Shabbat. We admit that everything that I'm thinking the whole day, and it's stam, it's shtusim, because only one who controls everything is you, and that's davening. A whole day, the body, nefesh habahamis is in control. Davening is when the neshama speaks. It's its ultimate outlet. Is it finally gets to express itself and talk the praise of Hashem and talk about what's important to it. And that's why he says, of all the mitzvahs, he says, especially when it comes to davening. Davening is the ultimate outlet and joy of the neshama. The Previous Rebbe, as I mentioned earlier, he was a prolific writer. So he wrote a whole diary of the time that he was in prison. One of the things that he writes over there is that when he was in prison, he would daven at length. So the Rebbe speaks about this, and the Rebbe says, why is the Previous Rebbe? The Previous Rebbe is trying to show off. So first of all, the Previous Rebbe davened at length every day. It wasn't in the spirit of Chabad. And especially in prison, by the way, the first day or so, he didn't have his talis and tefillin. He went on a hunger strike until they brought him his talis and tefillin. And but in prison, he didn't have any sfarim. So I'm sure he knew a lot of Torah about Peh. In fact, the Previous Rebbe, by the time he was bar mitzvah, he already knew the whole Mishnah by heart, the whole Shisha Siddur Mishnah. He learned it by heart. His father would give him money for learning by heart. He knew the whole Mishnah. So he definitely had a lot of Torah, but it's understood that when he's in prison and he's not tending to his community, he's going to daven at length. And why would he make a point of saying that? So the Rebbe says, obviously, everything the Previous Rebbe says is a lesson for us. And what he's telling us is that when we're in prison, we need to daven longer, in a spiritual sense. When we feel imprisoned by the nefesh habahamis, when we feel that the neshama is being stifled and is in captivity and is not fully able to express itself, so that means that it's a time to daven a little longer, because when we daven a little longer, that allows, again, the neshama to express itself a little more, which is interesting how it works exactly with this Tanya Ashgacha Pratis that we're learning today. V'zuhi, 8 lines on the bottom. V'zuhi b'chinas Teshuvah u'maisim tovim. This is Teshuvah u'maisim tovim. In the words of Chazal, we find this many times, this combination, Teshuvah u'maisim tovim. We have in Pirkei Avos, Yaf l'shah achas ul Teshuvah u'maisim tovim. Excuse me, what's the connection between Teshuvah and Maisim Tovim? Alter Rebbe says, Shehein Maisim Tovim Sho'isa. Teshuvah Maisim Tovim means the good deeds that you do, the mitzvahs that you do, Kedei lahashiv chelek Hashem, to be able to return to the Teshuvah, to return the peace of Hashem that you have within you, l'mekoira v'sharsha d'chol almin, to its source and the source of all the worlds. Every mitzvah is a form of teshuvah. Every ma'aseh toivim, every one of your ma'asim toivim is a form of teshuvah, but not the teshuvah in the classical sense of the word, but teshuvah in terms of that your neshama is put down here in a body, and a body which is it's a big galus for the neshama. And every time we do a mitzvah, we study Torah, we're doing teshuvah, we're returning the neshama to its rightful place and reuniting it and reconnecting with Hashem. This should be a person's service his entire life with incredible joy. He simchas hanefesh, the joy of the neshama, betzeisa mihaguf hametuv, as it leaves its disgusting body, v'shava el beisavia kinura, and returns to her father's home as she was in her youth. B'shas haTorah, when a person studies Torah, v'avodah, serves Hashem, u'kemaymer razal, as Chazal tell us, li is kol yamav b'teshuvah. What does it mean to do teshuvah one's whole life? You do have, a person doesn't have does teshuvah once. Why do you have to do teshuvah whole life? But teshuvah in the context that we're talking about over here is a lifelong process. As long as we live, we're doing teshuvah, we're learning Torah, doing mitzvahs to return the neshama to its source. There is no such great joy as the joy that one takes and can be able to leave the galus and the shivya and the captivity. So this is the challenge for all of us. Joy is readily accessible, and the amazing thing is, we always think, I'd be happy if I had this, right? The truth is that joy is available any moment, and you don't have to accomplish anything, you don't have to attain anything, you don't have to have $1 million, you don't even have to have 1,000,000 mitzvahs. At this moment, studying Torah, at this moment, studying mitzvahs and contemplating that what am I essentially I'm a neshama, and contemplating the joy of the neshama and tuning in and being in sync with the neshama and feeling that joy. And obviously this takes a recalibration of who I am. Simcha is possible, but it really takes a totally different set of priorities, and we'll continue with Hashem on this next week. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Lechshe yavutzu man es khutzu